Hey guys, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Game of Gymnastics Podcast. This week I'm going to be going through a brief history in men's artistic gymnastics and how we got here today, from ancient military training to Olympic podiums. I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Game of Gymnastics Podcast. This week is going to be something very different. I'm going to be going through the history of men's artistic gymnastics. This is something that I've always been interested in, but I've never gone into a massive amount of detail in. But today I'm going to try my best to go through a PowerPoint that I've created. So it felt like I was back in school when I was making it, but PowerPoint I've created, at least go over a brief history of men's artistic gymnastics. I was thinking possibly in a later episode going through women's artistic gymnastics. That's something that I think would be interesting to see the differences, but and if you think that would be interesting too, then let me know in the comments below. We will start with men's artistic gymnastics. So today we will be covering its ancient origins, 1800s Olympic gymnastics, 20th century code points and open scoring, and then the sport today. The reason I'm doing this episode is because I wanted to try something a bit different. I've always been interested in it. I've always been interested in learning the history of men's artistic gymnastics and how we've gotten to today. And I think it's important because if you learn what's happened in the past, you learn the cycles of what gymnastics has done in the past, then you can almost predict what's going to happen in the future. It's not as easy as it seems, but I think if you looked into the code points, what's changed each time, and I'll be going into a little bit of what happened with the code points as well, then you can sort of see the cycles. Obviously, there's the Olympic cycle, and that started in 2008. That cycle of it changing every 4 years. I think seeing the cycles is also quite interesting as well. We will start with its ancient origins, so looking back all the way into ancient Greece. Obviously, when we're looking this far back, there was no sort of structure, there was no rules, or like there would have been rules, but nowhere near as much detail as they are today, and also no sort of apparatus either. There's no structure to it essentially. But it did lay the foundation with the sort of movements and physical attributes that you will need to become a gymnast, essentially. It's also interesting to know that the ancient Romans also used it as a form of military training, primarily using a very ancient form of the pommel horse. And the reason they did this was to practice complex ways of mounting and dismounting an actual horse, which I think is just interesting, like to know. Obviously, still no formal competitions or anything. And when the Olympic Games were suppressed in 394 AD by Theodosius the Great, a lot of sports were essentially lost for millennia, or until they were picked up back up again in 1700s-ish, 1800s moving towards, which leads us to the 1800s. Friedrich Ludwig Schoen was credited as being the father of modern gymnastics, and he created a lot of the early versions of modern apparatus, namely the pommel horse, parallel bars, and horizontal bar. They also used rope climb in this time as an apparatus, which was also used up to the first Olympic Games that it was a part of. But there was also the Turn movement in Germany. I may be mispronouncing all of this. I may be completely butchering this, and if I am, I'm sorry. But it was essentially gymnastic societies. There was a lot more team apparatus, like group exercise, so it was a bit different to modern gymnastics, but it definitely laid the foundations. But also national governing bodies were created for the first time, first in Switzerland, then Germany and Belgium. So Switzerland in 1832, Germany in 1860, and Belgium in 1865. And then following that were Poland, Italy, and France in that order. And eventually, after all those national governing bodies were created, the FIG, originally the European Gymnastics Union, was formed in Antwerp on the 23rd of July, 1881. So we've had our national governing body for 144 years now. As mentioned, it was mostly group calisthenics and team apparatus, and it was also typically held outdoors. But again, it still laid the foundation. Like team parallel bars was often a part of the sport, as opposed to what it is today.
Hey guys, Winston here. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you are, please do leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you can. Also, if you want more gymnastic content from me, you can check out my Instagram at wpowell05 or my TikTok at winstonpowell5. Thank you, and let's get back to the episode.
Early Olympic gymnastics. So from the very start of the Olympic Games in 1896, or modern Olympic Games, I should say, men's artistic gymnastics was included. This is interesting because I've started looking into the differences between the men's and the women's side. It is interesting because the women's side was first created in first introduced into the Olympics in 1928, so 32 years later. So that sort of thing is quite interesting. And if you are interested in that sort of thing, then do leave a like, let me know that you enjoyed it, and I can go forward with in that Olympics, it was the horizontal bar, parallel bars, pommel horse, vault, and rope climb. I mentioned before that rope climb was an apparatus that was done at this time. I'm very curious as to what this would have looked like. I have no idea. But at this point, there really wasn't much like video or photography sort of thing going on. So it's really hard to know what actually happened. But I'm so curious as to what rope climb would have actually looked like. Was it just a race? Did they perform routines? Did they look like pole dancers with a less sturdy pole? I don't know. This is really confusing to me and something I'm quite interested in. Again, still early versions of the apparatus though, and obviously limited rules for scoring as well, because the code of points wasn't created yet, so there wouldn't have been a very static way of judging it, essentially. And also a lot of the routines were very strength and control based movements. Even on the pommel horse, they would do like half levers planches and stuff like that on the pommel horse, which is unheard of in today's day and age, because you want fluid and non-stopping routine. If you stop, then it's either a fall, or you're not getting counted elements, or you just get massively deducted. So very different to what sort of things we do now. Also, I'm very curious about what high bar would have looked like back then. But that's just my high bar interest coming through. Now, moving on to the 20th century, pretty much halfway through, because it would have been very static and very similar the first half of the 20th century. But in 1949, the code of points was finally introduced. Now, a Swiss coach who eventually became the FIG president from 1966 to 76, by the name of Arthur Gander, was credited as contributing heavily towards the code of points being introduced. There was also a follow-up document created in 1949, and it was then updated in 1954. So after the 1952 Olympic Games, where all 6 apparatus were competed for the first time. So floor, pommel horse, rings, vault, parallel bars, and horizontal bar. Now, in this sort of time period, the USSR, so what is now Russia and its surrounding countries, Japan and China would dominate all the late 20th century, as Japan and China still do. And I don't know much about Russia because obviously they've not been part of the competitions for a while, but they certainly have always had a strong team. And also skills started to be named after gymnasts as well. So Yukio Endo, Mitsui Sugihara, and Albert Azarian, for example, where they sort of started the trend of having skills named after gymnasts, which is now a very common thing for gymnasts to want a skill named after them. You want to get your name in the code. That's how you solidify your legacy in gymnastics. So James Hall, for example, just got his skill in the code of points, which is amazing for him. Straddle front half on P-bars. And then also there was two others, I think, with Vermore and Olclati as well. So there's a lot of new skills being added all the time. So those are just the most recent examples, but obviously there's more. So the trend was started by these pioneering gymnasts. Now, moving in to the 21st century. So vaults were changed in 2001. So mostly for safety, but also for development of bigger vaults, essentially, because you couldn't do much off of those. If you're watching a YouTube video, you can see what sort of vault it used to look like. You couldn't do much off of those, maybe a somersault, but now off the new vaults, which is also just a generic speed vault, you can do so much more. You can do so much more with straight somersaults and twisting and double somersaults, or realistically, because you start in handstand, it's 2.5 somersaults or 1.5 somersaults. But also in 2006, finally, the scoring system was changed. Now, up to this point, all routines were scored out of 10. So the highest possible score you could get was 10. Now, they then changed this in 2006 with the D score and E score being separated, difficulty score and execution score being separated. And this meant that there was no more limit on difficulty. You've got 2 separate scores for it, essentially. But so the execution and the difficulty. In the past, you had to do a difficult enough routine, and then if you've executed it perfectly enough, then you would go 10. But now you've got them as 2 separate scores. So yes, you want to keep the execution score as high as possible, but there's now no limit on difficulty. So you've got much more difficult routines because people are just constantly pushing the caliber. They're constantly pushing what is possible, like bigger releases on bar, bigger skills on P-bar, bigger tumbles on floor, huge vaults, things like that, especially with the vaults changing as well. But also now the code of points also changed every 4 years post 2008. So now every 4 years, every Olympic cycle, you get a new code of points, which then is judged all the way up to the next Olympic Games. So, for example, the one we're in at the moment is 25 to 28. The Olympics in 2028 will be scored on that code, and then they'll deliberate for pretty much the whole of that year on what's changed for the next code. It will be released a few months before the new year, and then it will go ahead as of January the 1st in the new cycle. That's normally how it works. So any competition after that will be on the new code. The sport today. Now we have national training centers and national programs and global exposure through social media and a lot more variety in styles of gymnastics. A lot of what you used to see is the same sort of build, the same sort of person doing gymnastics. Now you've got so many different people because you can have specialists. Because what you used to have is just everyone would do all around. Now you can specialize on individual apparatus. You've got a much wider variety of people who are able to do gymnastics. You've got people that are strong beyond belief who will be ring specialist. And then you've got people that are a lot slimmer and very strong for their body weight, but they've got much longer levers, so they'll be really good at pommels. So there's a much bigger variety. Like those are just 2 examples. You need different things for different apparatus, and some just because you're good at one doesn't mean you won't be good at others. Like that's why you've got people like Kohou Uchimura, who is on the screen if you're watching the YouTube video, who is the champion of all around. Like you don't need to just be good at one apparatus. You can be an all-rounder as well. And the specific type of apparatus you do doesn't need to reflect what other people would be specialists on. Like, for example, some people would be really good at P-bars and high bar, but just because you get a P-bars doesn't mean you get a high bar. Some people are like really good on P-bars and pommel, P-bars and rings. Like it doesn't really matter. Like I mentioned, you've got a lot more exposure through social media of gymnastics. So a lot more people are seeing it. I think we don't just need people seeing it, we need people actually watching it, actually looking for it. Because right now we've got a lot of people that know it exists. They might be pretty interested in it, they might not. It's hard to tell. What we need is people that are actual fans of the sport. Not necessarily in the sport, but we need fans of it so we can increase the exposure even more and keep snowballing it like that. Because it's a massively underappreciated sport in my eyes. In a massively underappreciated sport in my eyes. Like, I do it, I'm going to say that. Of course I'm going to say that. Like, that's just me. But I think if we had more eyes on the sport, it could explode. Even more than it has done already. Because we've got some incredible performers in Great Britain and in the world, obviously. And I think if we had more eyes on the sport, more people trying the sport, it could reach a new level. After I'm done with gymnastics, I don't want to be competing against that. There's something to think about. Obviously, I don't know how we'd get there, but that's another thing, I suppose. Obviously, it's not all good. There are some challenges. Obviously, injuries, in judging consistency and accessibility are a few that come to mind and are on the screen. Mostly this is just a visual aid for me to keep myself on track. That's literally it. But if you're on the YouTube video, you can see it too. I've tried to make it through. Injuries. I actually have started a different one about this. You'll understand when you see it. About a specific injury that I'm going through at the moment. I'm not sure if the amount of injuries that we experience as gymnasts is supposedly normal, or if it's something that we can do something about, whether we can do something different to try and help ourselves not experience them as much. But it's something to think about. It's always something to keep in the back of our minds. But it's always going to be an issue. It's always going to be an issue that people are going to get injured in sport, no matter what sport you do. But obviously, it's still a challenge.
If you're like me, you struggle with rips on your hands, seemingly at the worst possible times, like in a competition prep, for example. I'm proud to partner with Wad & Dunn, who have a solution for us gymnasts to help us train and protect our hands in the process. I especially recommend their rip guards for apparatus using grips or guards, whatever you want to call them, high bar, rings or A-bars, and their 3-step hand care kit to make sure your halluces are strong and rip resistant without making them soft. Use my code PAL at checkout or my link in the description for 10% off at checkout now. Back to the episode.
Judging inconsistency by virtue of the nature that it is an aesthetic sport and they are humans judging, there will be some discrepancies between just what they see realistically. That's why we have multiple people judging on both the execution and difficulty sides at the highest level, and you've got the opportunities for inquiries to be put in as well. Inquiries, whatever you want to call them. So you can always refute the difficulty score if you think it's wrong. And then you get to it gets looked at back by a high up judge, and then they can either reject or accept it. That's going to happen because, again, they are humans and people make mistakes. So something that was floated to me. I don't know if this is an actual thing that might actually go forward, but the head national coach was talking to me a few months ago about like the potential of AI judges going ahead. I don't know whether this could become a mainstream thing. I don't know if it is becoming a thing. I know very little about this side of stuff, so I do apologize about that. But in my mind, I assumed that AI judges would just be harsher. Like if they got it right, and if they got it calibrated to the code 1-to-1, I just feel like they'd be harsher because they're going to see things that judges miss. Just because, again, they're humans. So they will be accurate, but harsh is my thought process. It's also a question of how do you create that and how do you put it into practice and how do you make sure that it's not biased or whatever. But it's something that's an idea at the very least, and I'd like to know what other people think about that as a concept as well going forwards, because I think it's something that obviously AI is being implemented everywhere, so it's something it's a question mark over gymnastics whether we could make it more fair, air quotes. I've gone into a bit of more visibility and funding and stuff. Well, visibility, then creating more funding because more people are watching it and national governing bodies get more, and therefore the gymnasts themselves can get more. And there's going to be a higher level of competition just by virtue of the fact that there's going to be more people competing, and only the best of the best. Like the same amount of people get there, but if there's more people at the bottom, then there's going to be a higher level to be able to get to those places. That is a very, very brief history of gymnastics. Again, if you want me to go into specific parts of it, then I can. But if you want to do it by yourself, if you want to look into it by yourself or any specific part of this, then I would encourage you to do it, because it's a very interesting sport and I love it to no end. I love training, I love competing. So I think that more people should know about it and watch it and enjoy it, because realistically, our performances can be enjoyed by anyone, no matter whether you understand the sport or not. But I also think it has some interesting history. Now, thank you very much for watching / listening. Do subscribe and share the video so this can get to as many people as possible if you enjoyed it. And a question: what moment in men's artistic gymnastics history do you find the most interesting? And if you do find it interesting, then would you want me to go into a video on it? Because I'm more than happy to do this. I really enjoyed learning about this and going over what I might say in the video and all that sort of stuff. So if you enjoy this, then do let me know, and let me know what you want to see in the future. Now, thank you very much for listening / watching again, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.